Hi friends, welcome to Amy Bakes. Today is going to be a slightly different video. My son's birthday is coming up on Sunday and he has requested a patriotic cake. So I'm going to bake and decorate a cake for his birthday. And when I mentioned that to a few friends of mine, they said, oh, do a video. We want to see how you do it. So this is going to be a cake decorating tutorial basically. I'm not going to go over all of the things you're going to need because this is going to happen in multiple different stages over a couple of different days. So I'm just going to talk you through it as I do it instead of the usual, here's your supplies, here's your ingredients, and going through that. So we're just going to take this as we go, and there'll be multiple video cuts kind of all tied in together for this one. So let's get started. So the first thing we're going to do is bake the cake. And today is Friday, his birthday is Sunday, so you want to bake the cake in time for it to cool completely. If you've been watching any amount of time, you know that I prefer to do things from scratch. However, Duncan Hines just makes a fantastic cake mix. And I'm also doing this because it is a dairy-free cake mix and my son is allergic to dairy. So we're going to do this whole cake dairy-free for him. So we're going to use a Duncan Hines cake mix. I'm going to do an 8-inch pan. I want this to be tall, but not necessarily wide. And there's only 4 of us in the house, so we don't want a cake that's too big. So one cake mix is perfect for 2 8-inch pans. If I were doing this for a party and had 20-30 people or something, I would do a double layer 10-inch cake pan. But just for a small family, the 8-inch is perfect. So what we're going to do is we're going to put all this together, and then I'm going to mix it. I'm going to talk you through it now and then do it, because if I try to talk while this thing is on, you're not going to hear a word I'm going to say. So we're going to go ahead and just follow the recipe on the back. We're going to need a cup of water, 3 eggs, half a cup of vegetable oil, and the cake mix. We're going to put it in here. We're going to turn this thing on 6, and we are going to beat that for about 3 to 4 minutes. I've already got my oven preheated, so that is what I'm going to do right now. That's mixed in really good. Now we're going to prepare our cake pans. You can spray them down with Baker's Joy if you would like, or if you don't have Baker's Joy, you could do the old-fashioned Crisco and flour method, and that's what we're going to do today. So you can either dig in here with your hands, kind of feels gross. I'll just use a paper towel. So what you're going to want to do when you do this is reach in there, and you're going to grease the entire pan. Make sure you get in those corners. All right, and that's completely covered in Crisco. And do the next pan. So I learned to bake when I was 8 years old. My mom did wedding cakes, birthday cakes, all kinds of things. And she taught me to bake, and then as I grew up, I ended up doing it as well. I've never done it as a career. It's always been kind of word of mouth or for family and friends and things like that. So I have done some fantastic cakes, some fabulous cakes. I've had some epic fails along the way too, which are sometimes more fun than the good ones. I'll have my son put some pictures of some of the cakes that I've done here, because some of them are really unique. This is actually an easy cake compared to what he's asked for in the past. He's done some very elaborate cakes. And actually I have my cakes on Pinterest. I created I guess it's called a page, I'm not sure, but I created a little thing on Pinterest for Amy Bakes Creations, and I've got a lot of my cake pictures there. So if you want to go check that out, that might be fun. Okay, so now what we're going to do, we got these Criscoed very well and got it completely covered. You want to make sure that there's no dry spots or the cake can stick there. And next what we're going to do is we're going to put some flour in here, and then we're going to flour the cake, or the cake pan rather. All right, and to do that, I'll just do that. Let me move my salmon. That's what's for dinner. We're just going to do that. Just rattle this around like this, and then just fully move that around. Just rotate that cake pan. Make sure you get it completely covered in the flour. And I'll go to the other pan. It's going to be a little loud for a minute, and tap it out. You get the excess flour out. That's a little spot I missed right there. So you want to make sure you get it all. There you go. When my mom used to do this, I remember as a kid with her doing this flour in the cake pans like this, she'd tap it with her ring. And that gold ring, I would always know when she was baking because I could hear the gold ring banging against the side of the pan, the cake pan. That's just a fun memory. All right, I'm going to dump what's left of this in the trash. All right, now we're going to divide this batter as evenly as we can between these two cake pans. You can measure this out, or you can kind of eyeball it. Guess which one I'm gonna do. All right, let's see. There we go. We're gonna put about half in here, and then move over and do about half in here. Okay, we have the cake mix in the pans, and now as you can see, we have a whole bunch of air bubbles in there. So what I'm gonna do, normally I just do this directly on the counter, but it makes a lot of noise and it's gonna be very hard for you to hear. So I put the towel down to kind of mute the sound. So what I do is just lift it up and drop it multiple times, and as you can see, it helps pop those air bubbles. And you're never going to get them all out. So if you're a perfectionist, this will drive you crazy. I think that's good enough on that one. And now I'm going to do this one. And I just pick it up and rotate it, as you can see, a little bit with each turn. That's enough. Like I said, you're never going to get them all. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to wrap the cake pans with these. And these are, it's a Wilton product, and it's just a cake pan wrap. And what you do is you wet these. So I've already pre-wetted them. And then you just put them on your cake pan like so. And then you pull that to tighten it. And the purpose of this is so that the cake cooks more evenly. If it cooks on the outside first, then sometimes the inside is not quite as done, or sometimes you get this giant dome on the middle of your cake. This helps them cook more evenly, and it helps keep the edges of your cake from burning. So we are going to put this one on. This one's newer and hasn't been used as much, so it's a little tighter, a little harder to work with. See if I can get that on there. There we go. So we're going to do that. Now we're going to pop these in the oven, and I believe they're going to cook for 20-25 minutes. Okay, those are done. I'm going to turn the oven off. You want to make sure that when you insert a toothpick, it comes out clean. You can also see it's pulling away from the sides a little bit. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to flip them out onto a plate, and we're going to let them cool for about 8 minutes. So now what we're going to do is we're going to flip these out onto a plate, then we're going to let them cool for 8 minutes. And I'm going to set them over here to cool. Okay, now we're just going to wrap these guys up. And to do that, I usually just put this plate, or put the pan right back on it. And you notice I put that paper towel on there before I flipped them out onto the plate. And the reason I did that is because you can see this moisture. If you don't do that and you just put it directly on the plate, when you take it out, or when you flip it like this, then it's going to stick onto your plate. So now we're just going to wrap this guy up and let it completely cool, and then we're going to get started on the icing. We are now going to do the icing. Because my son is allergic to dairy, I'm not going to do the buttercream icing. I'm going to do a pure white for two reasons. One, the allergy, and two, whenever you're mixing colors, if you use buttercream, then the butter affects the color, the outcome. So, and we're going to be using red and blue, and so if you do butter and you do a blue, you kind of get a green hue to it, so we don't want that. So I'm going to do a pure white recipe. We are going to make the pure white icing, and I'm going to do the recipe that my mom always did. So we've got 17 ounces of Crisco, 1 pound, 1 ounce, and to that we are going to add imitation coconut extract, and you add a soup spoon. That's literally what the recipe says, a soup spoon of this. It's not too overpowering with coconut. And then you add vanilla. If you do regular vanilla, it's brown, and it is going to affect the icing color as well. You can also get imitation butter flavoring. This is the only one that I like. And this is a butter and vanilla. I don't like any other imitation butter flavors. So I'm just going to use this one again. And see, that's not brown. Oh, that's the last of it. So I'm going to put that in there. And then we're going to mix this up. To this, we're going to add 3 pounds of powdered sugar. I'm going to dump in some of it. Now, the original recipe calls for about 1/2 cup of milk. You don't want to just dump it in there because sometimes you'll use a little more, sometimes a little less. I'm using almond milk. There's a little bit of a color to it, whereas regular milk would be pure white. So I don't think it's going to affect the color too much, but you're going to just wet this down a little bit and then try to stir it in just a little. And let me tell you why. If you just drop this sucker down here and turn it on, you're going to get an explosion of powdered sugar, and it is going to finely coat everything. So you kind of want to mix this in a little bit to try to avoid that. Okay. Now we're going to turn this on, and then we will add the rest of the powdered sugar in increments. All right, now I'm going to scrape this off, and I'm going to do my second powdered sugar addition. I almost said addiction. Come around here behind the paddle. There we go. Add a little bit more milk, and then I'm going to repeat this process. For the final bit of powdered sugar, the recipe does call for 3 pounds, and a bag of powdered sugar is 2 pounds. So I went ahead and weighed to make sure that I got it correct, and I got my 3 pounds in there. Now I'm going to mix in the milk, and I'm going to get this to the right consistency. You want this a little bit on the stiffer side, because when you go to ice your cake, you can always thin it down, but you can't get it thicker again. So start with it thicker, and then as you use it, like you'll put it in a bowl, you can thin down a little bit at a time. So just keep that in mind. You don't want your big bowl to be too thick, because if you add more powdered sugar, you're just going to mess up the taste of it. This consistency looks pretty good. It's stiff, but it's not super stiff. Now I want to show you the difference in the white icing and in the buttercream icing. All right, I'm just getting as much icing as I can off the beaters here. And if you got young kids, save a little on there for them so they can lick the beaters. So here's the difference in the buttercream icing. And this one I had left over from my parents' wedding anniversary cake I did a few weeks ago. And here's the pure white. So you can really see the difference with them side by side. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to put a crumb coat on the cake. So you do want the icing a little bit thinner for that. So I'm just going to barely thin this out. But going back to the icing colors, what I would tell you is, if color is more important to you than the taste, then I would say go with the white icing. If taste is more important to you than the color, then you could go ahead and do the buttercream, because I do think the buttercream tastes better. But sometimes color is just more important than the taste of it. So just let that be your guide. We're just going to thin this out a little bit, and then we are going to put the crumb coat on the cake. Now we're going to put the crumb layer on the cake. So I got my cake stand. I just got this little charger plate. I'm going to put a little dollop of icing there, and then that's going to hold this little cake plate in place. Then I'm going to do the same thing here. And then I'm going to take my cake, and how you stack them is important. You want, see this, you've got kind of the domed part, and then this part is more of your squared edge. Okay, so we want that one on the bottom, and then when we put this one on, we're going to put that more squared edge on top. So you got the two domed edges that are going to be together. So you do not just stack cakes. If you do that, they're going to slide right off. It's going to be a disaster. You also don't ice warm cakes. You want to make sure that your cake is completely chilled before you do it. Because if you try, you are going to end up with cakes sliding off, because the heat of the cake will melt your icing. So I'm going to put this in there, and I just filled a popping bag. I've got this thicker icing along the edge. There you go. Now I'm going to put a little bit of this thinner icing in there, and then we're going to stack that cake. Okay, I'm looking at this because I want to get this as evenly as possible. And this side looks a little bit low, so I'm going to come in and put a little bit more icing here. There we go. Now I'm going to put the next cake. I'm going to stack that on there. Okay, now I've got that on there. I'm going to kind of press that in. There we go. And see if that's level. We're still a little low over here, as you can see. So I think I'm going to pick this up and turn this side's a little higher. This cake is a little higher. So I think I'm going to pick it up and turn it around that way. See if that doesn't help with that. That's much better. Okay, now we're going to put the first layer of icing on. What we're going to do now is the crumb coat. And you use a thinner icing. Because what's going to happen is as we ice this along, these little pieces are going to come up and just get all in the icing. And the crumb coat is going to seal all those little crumbs in. This is where you do not have to be super careful here, because you're going to go over this with a final coat. So I'm not going to be too careful, but I will let you see what it looks like. If I get crumbs in here, that's fine. I can scoop it in and go right back on the cake, because again, this is going to be covered with something else. So now I'm just going to go in and ice this. I'm going to start at the middle and see if I can see how you've got this gap right here. I'm going to see if we can go in and we're going to smooth that out with the crumb coat. So I'm just going to go in like this, and the first thing I'm going to do is even out that center. And you can see I'm getting crumbs in here, and that's okay. You can also hear my dogs barking. And my cat's meowing. There's never a dull moment in this house. All right, so we're just going in like this. If these layers were any thicker, I would have taken each individual layer and cut it in half. And I would have turned this into a 4-layer cake. But that would have been, because these are not super thick layers, it would have been way too much icing. Even for the icing lovers of the family. So we're gonna go along here. I'm fixing to close that little gap in. There we go. Now I'm just gonna go in and give a nice thin layer all over, starting with the sides, going all the way down to the bottom. What the crumb coat does, again, is it does seal that in, but you wanna let it dry. And you're gonna let it dry for several hours. You don't wanna come back in 20 minutes and turn around and start icing this, or your crumb layer is going to release, and then you're gonna get crumbs in your final layer. But on this particular cake, I'm actually gonna be decorating it a little bit differently, so I don't even need to come back and do a second layer. I'm still gonna let it dry just because I like to do that, but I'm gonna be icing little rosettes on top of this. So I don't have to be super careful, but if I were to come back with another layer of white icing, then I would definitely want to let that crumb coat dry. Now we're just gonna do the top, nice thin layer. Yeah, see how it pulls that up? This is what the crumb coat's for. Get all these imperfections covered up. And sometimes you may have to thin out your icing again just a little bit. It's really bad about doing this. There we go. I'm using a bent spatula, and the way I'm doing this is I am gliding across the top. Don't dig in and lift up. You want to just glide across the top, and this takes a little bit of practice. So make a cake and practice. Now I'm just going to go all the way around, make sure that all the crumbs are sealed in. Get that little area right there. That's a little tiny hole right there. I'll fill that one in. And just turn this around. There we go. And across the top. And now I'm gonna kind of get down eye level with it and just see that it's somewhat level. If I've got a low side, and I do right here, I'm going to put a little bit of extra icing in there. There we go. I'm trying to get this a bit as level as possible. I can also make corrections to that when I decorate the cake, so I'm not going to be too crazy about it being perfect, because the decoration I'm going to do on this cake is pretty forgiving. Now I'm just going to clean up all the scraps on this plate, and then we're going to let this set to dry for about 4 hours, and then I will do the final decorating. It is now time to decorate the cake. What we're going to do is have a flag theme, And so I'm going to have blue here, and then I'm going to do red and white stripes along the side. So I've kind of marked it where I want my field of blue, and I'm going to do rosettes along the side to create this, and then I'm going to have the top where it is solid, and then we're going to put some sprinkles, and I've got various sprinkles. I couldn't find one patriotic, so I went and bought several. So what I'm going to do first is, first of all, on the red, I cheated. I used this one because red is one of those colors that is very difficult to get nice and dark without changing the taste. So this one looks fantastic. It's beautiful deep red. We're going to use this. I've got my white bag already done. What we need to do now is we need to color the blue icing. So I'm going to use a toothpick to dip in here, and we're going to color this. Then I'm going to load my bag, and I'm going to show you how to do that. I have 3 tips that just happen to be this size, the 1M, and that's what I'm going to use for my rosettes. So you're going to snip off the end of this and just put the tip in there. And if you hear my dogs in the background, it's just really hot outside, so we brought them in. So you might hear them kind of playing. They tend to do that. Okay, now we're going to mix this in and see if I need to add any more. The trick with icing is you don't have to have it the exact color that you want it, because if you let it sit, it darkens. So after it's on the cake, it's going to continue darkening until it reaches, when it dries, it'll reach its final color. But I can tell you, I'm going to want that a little bit darker. So I'm going to add a little bit more and stir that in, then load it into the bag. That's looking good. It's hard. Okay, I'm going to cover the top with another coat. I'm not going to worry about the sides because I've got the rosettes that are going to cover that. My crumb coat is dry, but I'm going to very carefully put this on. And I'm not going to be too crazy about getting all the little lines out and having it perfect, because I'm going to cover that with the sprinkles. So you're not going to see it. I just don't want the crumb coat to be the underlying what you see. Try to get that on there evenly. Sides there. Okay. Now I'm going to start working on those sides. I'm going to pop these rosettes around from toothpick to toothpick. I'm going to start on the bottom and I'm going to go up. I'm going to want 4 rows. So here we go. What you do is squeeze, circle, and release. Squeeze, circle, release. Squeeze, circle, release. type. So I'm going to start with red. And again, I'm going to go from the bottom up. I'm going to go a line of red, a line of white, a line of red, a line of white. Okay, here we go. Now we are going to put the stars in the field of blue. These are actually royal icing stars that I made the other day. Though when this cake was coming up, I went ahead and made them. And then I've also got a December wedding cake coming up, so I practiced poinsettias. So while I had the royal icing out, I just did these as well. So we're just going to poke these in, and then I'm going to put the sprinkles on the top. Now I'm going to remove these toothpicks and put sprinkles on the top. Here it is, a patriotic birthday cake made dairy-free. Thank you for watching the cake decorating video. I hope you enjoyed it. I also hope you feel empowered to make your own cake. If you do, please leave me a comment, and also be sure to hit that like and subscribe and the bell notification so that you will be notified when I upload more videos. I've got some more cake decorating videos that I'm going to do. I've also got lots of desserts coming your way. So, James, happy birthday.